Hey everyone, this is Tim from Slingshot, and I am here with Johnny Scott, lead pastor of Generations Christian Church in Trinity, Florida, even though he is wearing a Colorado hat. And we have been talking about this new reality we find ourselves in that is changing daily, and how you do discipleship during this time of social isolation. Johnny's been doing some really innovative things. Talk about some of the things you've been doing, Johnny.
Yeah, well, thanks for letting me be a part of this. I hope it's blessing, guys. I got to tell you, this pulls me a little bit out of some comfort zones. God's been pushing me in some areas, and that's always a good place to be when you know you're uncomfortable, right? You're probably in the right place. If you're comfortable, you're probably not in the right place. And I have been living in a land of discomfort. Like a lot of us, as we're doing ministry, on so many different scales, we sit back, or late at night, we put our head on our pillow and we ask that question of, man, am I doing the things? Am I doing the most important things, the most crucial things for the mission? Do I have personal mission drift? The organization that I lead, do we have missional drift? And constantly juggling that and trying to pull myself back to center, back to the text and the example of Jesus. And so we have been implementing some things. I think we've tripped into some things, we've fallen into some things, but really they've kind of come up on us in a unique season of time where we were just kind of doubling down on some discipleship things for our entire staff and walking our staff through one-on-one discipleship stuff. And then COVID-19 hits us and we're like, how does this transfer? Like, what are the transferable principles? And so there's a few things. One, the person or the organization that's asking themselves, are we in a COVID era or a quarantine, or moving to a digital age, which we all need to be doing, whether or not this whole season of quarantine lets up or not. That's a brand new age. Whether you're there or not, as a person, as an organization, if you're asking that question, I think you're asking the right question. I'm afraid for people that aren't even asking that question at all. So a lot of the things I would love to bring you guys there, I've just got about 4 simple things that we are processing through. They might seem at first glance like the most simple baby steps, but I tell you what, if you just peek under the hood just for a minute, there's a lot of meat to chew on, and a lot of personal questions, organizational questions that go very, very deep. My pet peeve as a preacher is when someone says, "Oh man, it was so good to have some meat today," or "that full meal." And I just scratch my head and I look at them like, how many words from Jesus do you need before, do you ever look at Jesus and say, I want more from you today? Like, a few words from Jesus go really deep for me really fast. And I think that's how this issue is of, discipling people in a digital way. And so, one of the first things that I started to look at as for our organization was not assuming that people are not thinking about deep things. I think people are thinking about the deepest things you can imagine. And the way that we go about our church as an organization and our personal lives, our actions tend to put off this idea that no one's thinking about deep things, that everyone's surface level. People they look surface level, and 1 inch underneath that, the waters run very deep for I think everyone, especially during this season. And the digital ages, get this, is not a barrier. I believe that the apostles right now are standing at the gates of heaven, and they're looking over the rails, and they're like, why couldn't we be alive now? Right? And we're all saying, like, man, if we could have been with Jesus, Jesus looked at us and said, hey, you're going to do bigger things than what I've done. This is Jesus, like, you're going to do amazing things. The Spirit's going to come upon you. And I believe the apostles are looking at us in this day and age right now, and they're saying, man, if we could have all had Twitter, Facebook, Zoom calls, I mean, they would all have this stuff, right? And they would be maximizing these mediums in a digital age to, I think, the fullest level. So don't assume that people are not thinking deep all the time. We just have to get to a place where, whether it's 6 feet away, right, or in the old or the digital age, where we've created a platform where they know it's safe to go there in that conversation.
And how are you tapping into that? How are you tapping into that, Johnny? How are you tapping into that?
Well, So for us, there's been a few things. The number one way for us to start to tap into that is that we would not assume that people know the way, that people understand and know the way to Jesus. Like simple 101 here. People are thinking about deep things, but
Right.
we're assuming that everyone has heard and understand. The most recent quote I've read is it takes 27 times of a gospel presentation for someone to hear it, understand it, kind of apply it to their life, and then to say, why have I not made a decision to be a follower of Christ with my life?
Right.
And that might boggle some of our minds, but get this, I'm gonna make it really simple right now. The way that we use our social media platforms, the way that we're using some of the tools that we have digitally, we are not in a daily way putting the cookies on the lower shelf to say, this is why you have to hear the gospel. This is why you have to believe the gospel. This is why it's important for us to confess. This is why all the steps of repentance and obedience to baptism and walking new, we're not just saying it very clearly, because here's what's been crazy. When I've been in situations lately where I've had the opportunity to say, do you think you fully understand? I'm telling to people who have served in churches for years, to people that have been over churched or under church or not churched at all. And I just ask the question, do you think you understand the way to a relationship with God? Their answer is, I really don't think I know. Even though I know that some of these people, they've read books, they've been around Christian soup for a while, most people are going to say, I don't think I really know the way.
Right.
And so just not assuming that people know the way and asking the simple question, do you know the way, is a big deal. But that kind of leads to this very next step in the process. Not assuming that people aren't thinking deep things. People are thinking. People don't know the 101 or the simple basics is number two. The third thing is this, and this is what breaks my heart. I have cried tears over this. People think that we're too busy. We're in the business. I mean, if we're a follower of Christ, if you're a dentist or you're a full-time preacher who went to Bible college like me, right? We're in the business, all of us, of kingdom work and leading people to Jesus. That is the mission. Right. And it breaks my heart when people look at me and say, hey, man, I wanted to meet with you, but I know you're so busy. Right? That is like the kryptonite words to me. That crushes me. When people perceive that I'm supposed to be shepherding or pastoring or they're in my community in any way and I've got any influence over them and they perceive that I'm too busy for them, I am failing.
Yeah. So how are you dealing with that? How are you letting people know that you're not too busy? How are you raising that value of connecting?
So I'm going to give you a before and after. I believe that we're in a scenario of before 9/11, after 9/11.
Right.
Right. Before 9/11, I used to, one of my favorite Heather Fleece is a junior high pastor in Minnesota, and she is a wonderful lady. And Heather works at a church there, and she would always tell everyone when she does leadership coaching, you walk through a lobby slowly. You never run through a lobby, right? You stand around with a cup of coffee in church on the weekends, and you look available, approachable, disarming. Right. That's what I would say the answer was before our 9/11 moment. Now, I think that you have got to look for opportunities to show yourself with other people being available, because what that does is that demonstrates. You technically do not have the time to personally disciple every single in your church. You don't. But if there are not stories and anecdotes and actions or snapshot pictures of you doing it one, you're not going to be shedding that light of I'm available. And so for me, in a very personal way, I had to show that I was willing to do for those who were closest for just one. In my heart, I wasn't sure that our whole church understood the gospel, understood all the steps, even though every week I could throw here or there. And what does discipleship look like? So I just had to invite my neighbor Phil to say, Phil, walk through a section of scriptures with me. And be a host with me and do some with me for a day, just so I could say, I'm showing that if I'll do it for one, I think anyone else in my neighborhood or anyone else in my church was, hey, I had a question about this one point. Could you meet with me? Because I know you met with Phil. And so for me, I had to get real granular. And I'm constantly looking for opportunities to really just demonstrate that I'll meet with one. If you never do that and none of your platforms show that you're willing to meet with one, I think that we're going to be putting off this. We're the rabbit on, Alice in Wonderland. We're running to get to a meeting. We're running to get to something important when none of those things really matter. So
So break that down a little bit for us. So you have basically across your social media platforms demonstrated discipling your neighbor, Phil. How did you do that, and what has the effect been?
So that one little story, as far as that, Phil's a guy that started coming to church a while ago, and good friend, and we're in a text group, him and our wives, and he's a crack up, and we have significant faith conversations. But I had never personally walked Phil all the way through a process, of, do you understand what it is to come to know the Lord? So I said, hey, Phil, could we do this? And so my son, my 14-year-old son, in the course of 5 hours, filmed us one day. We played darts, played pool. We went swimming in his pool. We did a little bit of nursery outside. We hung out. We had a Coke together, and we walked through kind of a ramped up, revved up version of the Romans Road. And we just went through the steps. Phil, this is what it means to hear. This is why hearing is important. This is why, and they were 1 minute, 2 minute little episodes, and every episode was relational, not just me. So many right now, if you flip through social media, you see lots of people with great intentions, and they're sitting down and they're looking at a screen, giving great content. That stuff's out there. I mean, right now, if I hear that, I could pull up John MacArthur or Chandler or some incredible communicators to fill me and to help me understand theological tenets and places of, points of interest that I need to understand the gospel. But I think that was resonating. What we need to see is what Jesus did, sitting with Nicodemus, right? And walking Nicodemus, a guy he knew, a guy that he could have a meal with, and hearing him say something back and responding to that. And so I felt like that model needed to be demonstrated for people say, actually, it wasn't edited really well. It wasn't clean. There was no script. I didn't tell Phil anything. I just said, Phil, I'm going to say something brash, and you read the verse, and we'll see what God's word has to say about it. And Phil read it, and he's like, wow, that is brash. And then we just talked about it. And a minute and a half later, the episode was done. And I think that people need to see, though, I really think people need to see us one-on-one demonstrating that snapshot.
Yeah, you've always been really creative about discipleship anyway, using digital means and digital creativity. What new opportunities do you think have bubbled up during this season of suddenly being pushed all online that are available to us now for discipleship?
Well, I would say this, specifically right now, we're in a window of hunger. I think that the Lord moves through events that none of us could ever imagine, and there's an incredible eagerness and hunger for people. And so one of the things that's just available is everyone right now has a radio station. I remember when I was a kid, we had this thing in Indianapolis called the Hot 9 at 9. And that was the 9 biggest songs in Indianapolis. And you had to call in, and you had to request your song. And then if you were lucky, everyone's listening to Hot 99. You could say, hey, this song's going out to Jennifer. Hey, and I love you, baby. And they would play that song. There was one radio station, ZPL, 99.5. There was only one radio station. We live in a day and age where every single person has multiple radio stations, right? And your voice is so important in the way that only so many people are going to resonate with the way God made me, right? There are people out there that have a voice, and I think that we all need to be exercising our voice. A good friend of my life named Eric Samuel Tim, who's an artist that was with me at CIY for years, he says, you've got to own your lane. We're all going to stand before Jesus and be responsible for owning our lanes. And so I think some of the things that right now that are out there that are cropping up is people are using some of these tools that are out here, and they're not using them extremely strategically. For me, I jumped on our neighborhood Facebook site and just said, hey, I'm willing right now to meet with you. And it doesn't have to be a video. I'm not going to make you a star like Phil, and you're not going to have to be everyone else's business, but I'm willing to meet with you. We don't have to go out of our house to do that. My wife has got an online Zoom study happening just in the neighborhood right now. There are people that are willing to come to an online Zoom study that would never come to a home because they don't know if you have a cat, and they don't know if they're going to like you. And they like that barrier of freedom where they can turn the camera off or turn you off or walk away, and there's fear. And so this is a great innovative way for us to get into people's lives. I believe one of the gifts of the Spirit is hospitality, and that's not baking. We are like, oh, that's baking cookies. No, the gift of hospitality is this unique way of disarming people, taking down barriers, removing walls. And I think the digital age is the ultimate in that, because we can come into people's lives in the most intimate ways, where whenever they're ready to get the message, and we can give them that message in a way that's not threatening to them, where they can kind of control the parameters. And so I would be challenging people right now to use some of these things, and it's not service level, to be very clear on some of these mediums. I'm available. I'm not too busy. And the last thing that I would say in all of this, and it's probably the most important of it, is none of us have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, right? None of us have to be like, man, I've got to make this happen. I mean, if we just stop and think, Lord dispatches angels. He doesn't use 5G. He doesn't use high-speed internet. He uses you and your unique circumstances. And Jesus's plan for your life is you. Jesus' plan for your Twitter followers is you. You don't need any more Twitter followers. If you just got the Twitter followers that you have, you are his plan. And so I believe that the number one thing in all of our arsenal in this is to say, first, a conversation with the Lord. Father, help me be available. Help me look available. And then put me in touch with the right people at the right time to do what I can do. None of us have to quit our jobs, read 40 books, take a master's class, and we start to feel this weight. Like I know, when my good friend Tim says, Johnny, let's talk about discipleship in a digital age. Man, I just start to feel the weight, right? Like, man, all of us could be doing more discipleship. Like, but God's not calling you to be Billy Graham. He's calling you to the places where you have influence. And if he wants you to have more influence, he'll be in charge of that. I would say that the prayer needs to start with, help me be responsible for the influence I currently, right? When a little bit is given, if you're responsible with that, much will be given. We've got to start to become responsible for the platforms we currently have.
That's good. Johnny, talk real briefly about how you're mobilizing your staff. I've really appreciated hearing about that, particularly how you're putting them in Zoom breakout rooms at the end of your weekend live stream. Talk just quickly about how you're doing that.
I've loved this idea. I don't even know on our staff where it originated, or I would just tell you this awesome staff member did it. I think it's been a little bit organic for us because we gauge the health of our church a lot of times on biblical fellowship. We think discipleship naturally flows out of biblical fellowship. And not missing the coming together, like the real koinonia, right? The ecclesia, the gathering of the church. And so for us, how long people stayed in the lobby and how long people were there engaging in the lobby, and the fun and the joy and the ministry that happened in the lobby or down front end of the message were huge metrics for us on church health. And that's what we talked about. And once this was taken away, we felt like we were robbed of one of our number one church metrics to talk about how are we doing. And so it seems natural for us to say, not that we don't value preaching, and I don't work on preaching, and I'll always be a worship pastor, right? I did that for most of my life. And so we put a lot of chips in and resources into worship. And it's not that we don't value those things. I would say that we are an attractional church unapologetically in our model. We believe that works. But for us, that was never the reason people came. And so our vernacular would always say, isn't it great to be together and to talk together? We're probably one of the only churches in the country that reinstituted a meet and greet time, when all the studies would tell you that people hate meet and greet time. They hate it, man. But we said we want to overcome that with just contagious joy and affection for one another, because we wanted to reclaim what the early church was in the book of Acts, where they were known by Christians are loved. So in this age for us, we've said we've got to get our show unapologetically as small as it can be, right? We want union, we want to have reflection, we want to have God's word, but we are telling people, hey, the best part of church is when we're dismissed right now. And so on our site, generationcc.com, if you go there, like a lot of us right now, our online button is it's real easy to get to our online offering. But right there, you can watch online, but very visible in that front screen is, as we're transitioning from the watch part of church, we're inviting people to participate part of church. So every staff member is assigned weekly a Zoom group to be in. It's so user-friendly for all people. You can just click on it. They're affinity-based. We don't police it hard. I've actually been in the 60-plus group for the last 3 weeks. And so there's people with young kids and singles and newlyweds, and every staff member is in a different Zoom meeting. Elders are in different Zoom meetings. And after every church, we want the experience to be an hour. And I'll say this, hey, you're dismissed right now to biblical fellowship. Log on and participate. And at the 9 o'clock hour, no one's showing their screens. It looks like this, right? That's what it looks like. No one's showing their screens. At the 11 o'clock hour, everyone's showered, right? And they've got their coffee, and we're chatting. You know, some weeks I'll give my people, I'll say, hey, I did 1 point in my sermon. The other 2 points, you've got to come to biblical fellowship to get it. Yeah. And we'll talk about that. And, you know, there's chats in there. There's prayer time in there. And so it's 50% of what we're doing is pushing people to online Zoom. And here's what I would tell folks. They're like, well, Johnny, how successful is that for you right now? I'd say this. I would say it is the core of our church. You know, it's 20% of our church that's engaging in that. But we feel like we feel like this is a workout. It's really good because we're getting tighter. We're knowing one another better. We're walking this together. We're going to come out tight, okay? But as this continues, and if quarantine continues in other weeks, and with Easter coming here in a few days, if you're watching this before Easter, we have the opportunity, because we've done this workout, that we're going to be ready for another 20 or 30% to log on. Right. As loneliness is setting in. I mean, our local police chief has called us. Suicide attempts are up. Baker Act calls are up. Domestic violence calls are up. We think that more people are going to be looking for help than ever before. And so the Zoom kind of virtual lobby, we call it it's just coming to the lobby. That's all it is. It really is an important tool for us.
It sounds like connection. It sounds like discipleship. As we close, Johnny, what's one thing that lead pastors and church staff can do today that will make the most impact as far as discipleship during this season is concerned?
I would say the number one thing that can happen, and this is old school, you know, as I'm talking to other pastors, I'm so encouraged to hear guys doing it. So I'm going to reiterate what we're doing is number one, and what other people need to be doing is number one, is you've got to do an old-fashioned phone call. Okay? We've got this saying on our staff. I got it from a marketing guy back in my Orlando days who just a real good market guy. He said, an invitation to everyone is an invitation to no one. And he would always urge us. He's like, you know, when you say, hey, we're all going to do this, that's never as powerful as a pastor who loves someone calling someone and saying, Bill, you and your wife, Sherry, would you do this? And so when we reach out and talk and call people, we hear prayer requests that's like, well, I wasn't going to put it on the prayer request, but I'll tell you. Right? Well, I wasn't. They're not asking for help. But when you call, you find out they need help. They're not sensing how stressed they are. When you call and they start to process and you just listen to what they said, they'll regurgitate to you like, oh, there is tension in your home. There is worry about work. You do miss church. It'll bubble up. But an email, all church email isn't going to do it. An all church post isn't going to do it. Something sewed on a pillow, really nice, is not going to get it done, right? A video isn't going to get it done. Calling people. And so I don't think we're doing great at it yet, but we're banging the drum. We're all trying. We've got a share file that we all have where we're reporting our phone calls, and we've got a good old-fashioned call tree right now that we're just trying to exercise weekly, and I think it's going to make the most. And for a lot of people, what that next step is when your staff stops doing it
Mm.
and your people start realizing that they need to do it. Then you go from 5, if that's your context, or 10 staff members making 10 phone calls to 100 people in your church making 10 phone calls.
Mm.
That's when you really get unity in the body. This is a time for unity, and so I think the phone calls is number one.
Yeah. And people are wanting to talk. We're experiencing that too. Great handles to hold on to here. And speaking of unity, we're all in this together. Johnny, thank you for sharing what you've been digging into. And I think right now we should probably get off this Zoom and make some phone calls.
Right. Thanks, brother. So good to spend this time with you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Johnny.
Bye.